sort of strange sort of twist that occurs. He bends down, has them all sitting around, and he washes their feet. And he has these exchanges with his disciples about what service is and what it means to be a servant leader. And they're scratching their heads, and of course Peter says, no, you're not going to wash my feet. And of course Jesus says, oh, you don't let me wash your feet, you have no part of me. And oh no, then bathe me all around. He's one of these guys that kind of gets it wrong and then gets it wrong again, right? We like to sort of chide Peter, but the truth is, Peter's us. How could we expect to get it and to understand it and to know it completely? These exchanges are actually really important because Jesus doesn't just scoff at it. Jesus uses them as teachable moments to really, again, further expose why he's actually there. And of course, they have the Last Supper, and I'm sure it might have felt like other meals that they've had with him, but he says these strange things like, this is my body, which is given for you. This is my blood, poured out for you. Okay, that's sort of weird. And then they sort of depart from that place. And they go to a place, a garden at Gethsemane, and he's praying, which is not unusual. I mean, they've had 3 years of this with him going off and praying. But he asks them, could you please just stay awake with me 1 hour? I know this is another round of prayer, and I know it's boring for you. Again, Jesus meeting us in our own humanity. How else could we not sort of meet it that way? We don't know the gravity of all this. And he's going, and he's literally sweating like drops of blood. And he's saying, please let this cup pass from me. We know this isn't some sort of suicidal endeavor, right? And that's a hard concept. And I don't mean to bring it up lightly as a triggering potential for folks. It's not light. But we know that Jesus is going through a process. And indeed, he's betrayed. He's arrested. Betrayed by one of his own whom he loves. And he's taken into the authorities. And they bebop between, was this the religious authorities or the secular authorities, or who's going to be, and all this sort of stuff. I mean, that's traumatic alone, let alone the trauma of the beating, the whipping, the torment. And then it's just sort of left up to the wind, essentially, his fate. The wind of our own voices yelling, crucify him. And Pilate washes his hands of it because he doesn't even know what to make of it. And he's strung up on a tree, left there to die. Taken down after several gruesome hours and stuffed into a tomb that wasn't even his own because it was getting late in the day. And things needed to be tended to. Traditions had to be held. Commandments needed to be followed. So when we say, Alleluia, Christ is risen, this isn't just some sort of weird bout of euphoria that we just sort of engage in because we're excited about being excited. It's because something profound has happened. The profundity of Jesus being raised from the dead is universe changing. It goes against everything that the universe could possibly be imagined as being. The black of space, the dark of and cold and vacuum of no life. And yet the miracle that life wins over death, which is just as astounding, by the way, of life even existing amidst death. This is the most profound moment outside of creation itself. However you understand that, by the way. If you're a hardcore science person, it's still miraculous. If you are somebody who is very literal about how things are unfolding in the Bible, cool. It's still a miracle. It's actually a really great meeting point amongst a whole spectrum of thinking about the wonder of our existence. I was confronted with the profundity of the resurrection just this last week as I was preparing a care package for my son who is in college down at the University of Arizona. And didn't do like an Easter basket sort of thing, but there were Eastery basket sort of things in there. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I should get a card. I never really thought about getting a card. I don't get an Easter card. This isn't like, a birthday card or anything. I mean, I don't know. I like getting cards for people for things, Valentine's Day and, all that sort of stuff. But I thought I'd never been in the market for an Easter card. I never really thought of it. So I was looking at Easter cards, and I was just amazed at how impossible it is to actually convey an Easter greeting in a card. I mean, I'd preached on it for now my 18th year as a priest this year, that there's nothing sentimental about this day, and it can't be done in a Hallmark card. And this year, I actually proved it. You can't find a message because it all just feels so cheap. Blessings to you this wonderful Easter day. We wish you the best of all springs, or something like that. Or he is risen. May God's blessing be upon you. Well, that's sort of true, but I mean, that doesn't really pierce at the gravity of what it is that we're actually doing here. I got him a card. I wrote Christ is risen all over it and, did as much as I could. But the truth is that none of this can be just sort of summarized in the good feels of the day. None of this can be. And yet we step into it. We step into this joy and this space, and we say our Alleluias, and we find our Alleluias, and we light the new flame, and we'll renew our baptismal vows. But in truth, if we don't understand it as universe changing, and we go from this place not transformed, not seeing each other with just a little extra value, and just relishing in the miracle that every cell of our bodies and beings is miraculous. This moment in time that we have, which any one of us could be struck dead at any moment. Could be an aneurysm, could be a meteor. Doesn't matter. But it can happen like that. Lights out. But the fact that we have yet another moment, a moment that we can't control, that we get, but yet we have breath in our lungs to breathe, and sight in our eyes to see, and sound in our ears to hear, and just kinetic energy that allows our blood to flow. And we're not going, oh man, hallelujah. Then this is all just a show. It's all just a show. And there's no point. Jesus was raised from the dead as an historic bodily experience and event. We are not meant to fully and completely grasp it, just called to accept it and to live into it and live into the miracle of being. That's the message of this day. And it's the message for tomorrow and the next day and the day after that and next week and next month and next year. It's the message for all time. And it's up to us to be the gospelers, the sharers of that good news. What's the good news? Despite it all, we're worth it. Despite it all, God sees us as worth it. And hell hath no fury to the one who takes that for granted. Because the moment we take that for granted, we're already in the barbecue. And shouldn't we be? That's about as close as I'm going to get to like one of those spicy sort of southern sermons, okay? So don't worry, I'm not going south real fast here. But the truth is, we want to think of hell as something that we just sort of fall into, but it's of our own making. And haven't you had those experiences in your life where things are just that bad? You don't have to wait to experience that. It can be very much in this life. But the message of today is that that doesn't win at all. The gates are broken open, and we are indeed yanked up by our wrists out of that pit. And we're yanked up, as I shared last week, by our wrists because the compelling message of that witness is that we can't even pull away from it. God is so bent on saving us from ourselves that we can't even escape it. Wrap your head around that. So, my friends, Christ is risen. And he's risen indeed, and indeed, and indeed. This is why the Alleluia is so important. Because the Alleluia is the only response that we can give. A hearty shouting of inexplicable joy and gratitude. Because if you know anything, you know you can't do it by yourself. You ain't going to get raised from the dead by yourself. It isn't going to happen. But God yanks us up. And we can't put it in a card. Christ is risen!
The Lord is risen indeed!
Hallelujah!